Good morning. Welcome to the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care Committee meeting. For those around the table, so for myself and for MAG staff, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question and mute when you are not speaking. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located on the information table and give it to MAG staff. If you are in the audience today, please remember to sign in at the information table. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available on the information table. If you purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available for MAG staff. We will now ask Haley to proceed with roll call. Please indicate you are here and your organization after Haley calls your name.
Thank you. Michelle Alberti. Don Bogart.
Here, Don Bogart, Homeless Youth Connection.
Vanessa Carthel.
Present with Arizona Behavioral Health.
Allison Cook Davis.
Hey, it's Ashley Ziganek. I'm sitting in on behalf of Allison from Morrison Institute.
Thank you, Ashley. Anne Marie Johnston.
Anne Marie Johnston, present with Community Bridges.
Callie Lamers.
Present, Save the Family.
Christina Lopez. Janet Flores for Mercy McFarland.
Present with Home Inc.
Jim McPherson.
Good morning, Jim McPherson, Phoenix Community Alliance.
Jennifer Page.
Good morning, Jennifer Page, Mercy Care.
Aaron Rains.
Present, City of Mesa.
Ty Rosensteel.
Morning, this is Ty Rosensteel with Solari representing 211 and HMIS.
Patricia Scott Lopez.
Present with Arizona Complete Health.
Sarah Sims. Laura Scott-Nicky.
Laura Scott-Nicky, the Salvation Army. Good morning.
Mila Valley.
Mila Valley, Imani Day Center. Good morning.
Christopher Wallace. Emily Walsh.
Present with Maricopa County.
Rana Islas.
Present with Chicanos por la Causa.
Co-chair Nathan Smith.
Present, Phoenix Rescue Mission.
And co-chair Richard Cruz. Did I miss anyone? Perfect. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is call to the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under the Continuum of Care Committee that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. MAG staff, were there any comments received or anyone who has joined the call to offer comments?
There were no public comments received or members of the audience wishing to speak at this time.
Well, thank you. We'll move on to the next agenda item. Consent agendas will approve multiple items at the same time. Committee members can always ask for an agenda item to be pulled off the consent agenda to be heard during the meeting, at which time staff can provide additional information, give a presentation, and answer any questions. Does any member of the committee have questions or comments on the consent agenda? With no questions or comments, could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second, Don Bogart.
Is there any discussion of the motion? For committee members in the room, we will do a voice vote. Those in favor, please say yay. Yay. For members joining remotely, I will ask Haley to proceed with a roll call vote. Please indicate clearly how you vote, stating yay or nay after your name is called.
Thank you. Don Bogart.
Don Bogart, yay.
Vanessa Carthel.
Yay.
Ashley Ziganek for Allison Cook Davis.
Yay.
Anne Marie Johnston.
Yay.
Kelly Lamers,
Yay.
Janet Flores for Marcy McFarland,
Yay.
Jim McPherson,
Aye.
Jennifer Page,
Yay.
Aaron Rain,
Yay.
Ty Rosensteel,
Yay.
Patricia Scott Lopez,
Yay.
Laura Scott Nikki,
Yay.
Mila Valley,
Yay.
Emily Walsh,
Yay.
Raina Islas.
Yay.
Did I miss anyone? Great, thank you.
And thank you. So we will now move on to the next agenda item. In early 2023, the board approved a new set of monitoring policies and associated tools created by the MAG staff. Cleo Warner, Human Services Planner with MAG, will provide an overview of the policy and the monitoring process.
Thank you. All right, so as mentioned, these were last updated and approved this January. So for some of you, this process will be, you'll have already experienced me coming to your office and doing desk monitorings with you or sending you new tools that we've created. And for others, this will be sort of your first look at what this process looks like. As we've created new tools and a new process, it's been sort of a 1.5 to 2 year timeline of rolling out all of the new things we're doing. So this year will be sort of the first complete year that we fulfill all of our monitoring dreams. Next slide, please. Just to give you a sense of what our objectives are, we do need to uphold federal and community standards as the collaborative applicant. But this is also a moment to maintain communication with providers and keep lines of communication open and identify any supports that are needed really on either end. Like, what do MAG staff need to be doing to help you do your job better as a provider who receives COC funding? And what do you need to be doing better to up your community standards that we've all agreed upon? So together, this works to really improve overall system performance. Just to let everyone know, these are not really considered program audits, but instead designed to be opportunities for agencies and MAG to work together to assess performance and highlight successes and challenges to really figure out how we strengthen program design and execution. Next slide, please. Okay, so throughout the next few slides, we're going to go over who's monitored, when it happens, and what tools do we use to monitor. Next slide. So throughout this presentation, you're going to kind of see this division between this prioritized monitoring and routine monitoring. Prioritized monitoring, think of those as like your pretty traditional desk monitorings. This is when we have more intensive monitoring tools for an agency to complete. We schedule time to go into an office to review files and have an in-person discussion about things that are happening within the program and learning more. Routine monitoring you can think of it more as like an annual check-in. So these are agencies that are not chosen for that more prioritized monitoring, but they still complete these annual check-in tools so that all COC funded agencies have some sort of monitoring interaction with us every year. So furthermore on that, who is decided for these prioritized monitorings is determined by a number of criteria that are outlined in our monitoring policy, which is available for everyone to look at on our website. We look at NOFO score, project spend down. We take into consideration feedback that comes from the rank and review committee, as well as information we get from previous monitorings. And then what is sort of new this year is this biannual cycle we're doing. So basically agencies who are not prioritized through these top 4 criteria here are then divided into groups alphabetically, and then they receive on-site visits on like an every other year basis, so that even though you're not one of these prioritized agencies, there's still every other year MAG staff getting to that lovely opportunity to come to your office and sit down and talk with you about your program. And again, just an opportunity to really learn more about the details of how your program is operating. So when does this happen? These prioritized monitorings happen on like an October to December timeline, is when we first will reach out to you. You're gonna complete those tools that we send, and then on-site visits December to January-ish. Exact monitoring calendar fluctuates every year depending on the NOFO timeline. So monitoring sort of happens almost immediately after NOFO completion. So that's why there's that fluctuation there, and gives us, some flexibility to make sure everyone's schedules work for this. Those routine monitorings then happen at the very beginning of the new year. So we'd get in contact with you around the January to March timeline. And then for those chosen biannual visits of the non-prioritized agencies, those on-site visits would happen closer to the spring. Okay, we spent tons of time making our tools, redoing our tools, editing the tools, seeing if they work, getting feedback on them. And we have a ton of them now, which is great. If you are chosen for prioritized monitoring, you fill out more things for us. If it's routine monitoring, it's more high-level tools. All of these are on the website as well, and you can check them out. Basically, the idea is that you complete these. They work together on both a program and agency level to help us see if there are any like service or regulatory or structural gaps that we can then have conversations about. The idea is that you don't just complete these and then no one looks at them again. MAG staff are looking at them after you complete them, or after an agency completes them. And they are super useful for making sure that everyone is on the same page about programming. Next slide, please. The sort of final piece of this is what comes after the monitoring process, which is technical assistant or any improvement plans that happen. So what technical assistance looks like differs year to year. It depends what programs are needing and what they've requested. We get feedback during the monitoring process on what agencies are really looking for, what they feel like they need more training on or assistance with, and that dictates a lot of this. All agencies have that opportunity. Question is not a word, sorry about that, in case you're reading the presentation. We do have 56 trainings at this point available on the Learning Gateway, thanks to Dylan and the community and all the amazing work we've had to gather those. So ideally in the future, it's like when agencies are requesting this training, that becomes something we put in the LMS and then can point people to. And we just have this lovely growing library of education for our agencies. And then performance improvement plans would then happen if, after technical assistance is offered, there are still project gaps that aren't showing signs of improvement, or there's, consistently not meeting of COC standards, then that's when we work more intensely with an agency to figure out improvement timelines and figuring out sort of what needs to happen to get an agency back up to speed and standards for our COC. Any of that I can go into more detail about, but again, the policy is on our website that outlines a lot of this, so feel free to go check it out if you're interested.
Thank you, Cleo.
Thanks.
Are there comments or discussion from the committee?
I have a quick question. Well, first I wanted to say also thank you to Dylan with the COC learning platform. That's awesome. And my staff is utilizing it pretty frequently. So we talk a lot with Dylan about that. So thank you. And second, I just wanted to say the monitoring tools you said are on the website. Do you know which section?
Yes. So if you go to our policies and procedures, so you'd go to azmag.gov, go to homelessness, our policies and procedures tab. The monitoring has its own little section, I believe.
Got it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
And Callie, I will also send a follow-up email with that link too.
Okay, great.
Are there other questions?
Yes, I have a question. So as the monitorings have been taking place, how is that factored into the scoring process in the annual review?
So we have a question on our NOFO scorecard that speaks directly to monitoring in terms of responsiveness to findings and responsiveness of returning tools and things like that. So at the moment, that is how it factors in.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else on this item? All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next agenda item and discussing new member recruitment. Each year, the COC committee opens membership recruitment. The COC committee will discuss the current open seats, who will sit on the membership work group, timeline for recruitment, and vote to open the membership. Haley Owens, Human Services Planner with MAG, will now provide information on perspectives that are underrepresented on the COC committee.
Just would like to put one caveat. Since this is our regular membership, we do not have to vote to open it. That is only for special opening. So
Okay,
I miswrote on that.
thanks for the question.
So with almost all of our committees, I would say all except for this one, we are bound by a certain number of people that can serve on the committee. That's not what we have here. So we can technically include as many people as we want. But right now we have 21 folks that are sitting on our committee. And we have 17 membership categories. So I'm just going to read through them really quickly and then let you know what we don't have represented currently. So we have nonprofit homeless assistance providers, victim service providers, faith-based organizations, governments, businesses, advocates, public housing agencies, school districts, social service providers, mental health agencies, hospitals, universities, affordable housing developers, law enforcement, organizations that serve veterans, currently homeless individuals, and formerly homeless individuals. If you want to take a look at that list again, if that was a little rapid, it is in your charter. So those are groups that through your charter, you've identified that you want to be represented through the committee. The ones that we don't have represented, as far as I know, are victim service providers, public housing agencies, and currently homeless individuals. So those are the three that are missing. So that is just something to consider when reaching out to all of your networks to bring people into the fold. Would definitely highly encourage that. The application will be live after this meeting. But yeah, just want to open it up for any discussion or comments that you all may have, / volunteers for the membership review committee or work group rather. Don't all jump in.
Ashley Ziganek here. Can you repeat the three that we're missing?
Absolutely. Victim service providers, public housing agencies, and currently homeless individuals.
Haley, I'll volunteer to sit on the panel. I did it last year.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Are there any questions about that? And are there any volunteer, like work group volunteers? How many people do we want to have in a work group? Is there like an ideal number you're looking for?
Yeah, I would say
Yeah,
between 3 and 5.
3 to 5. Okay. So we'd love to get 3 to 5. We have one and I'm already on a work group, so I won't volunteer. So we'd love to get a few more people. And we don't have to do all of that right now. You can follow up also after this meeting if you'd like to. Is there anyone who is interested in volunteering to be on that work group?
I will just give you a little more detail while you're thinking about it. It's usually an hour to an hour and a half meeting, depending on how many applications we get. We have like a standard rubric that we use. So we do take time to discuss each application, but it is not painful at all. So would definitely highly encourage, and you get to hang out with me for a little bit. So you are, I look forward to hearing from all the people that want to serve on that work group.
This is Letitia. I just have a question. Are you all considering recruitment strategies for those that are currently homeless? Because getting it out in the way that we're currently doing it is not going to engage folks that are currently homeless.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I'm very open to hearing what you all have to say about that. But for our youth action committee and lived experience committee, which are all made up of folks with lived experience, I have been doing targeted outreach from the MAG side to promote, to encourage folks to apply if they have lived experience or if they are currently experiencing homelessness. And then with the lived experience committee, we had a record-breaking number of applicants. We had 19. So, so that was good for that. But if you guys have any other ideas too, would definitely be happy to hear those and implement them.
You may want to use the lived experience committee to do some targeted recruitment for this committee.
Thank you so much.
Haley, this is Mila. I'd love to be part of the work group.
Thank you.
Anything else on this item? All right, we'll move on to the funding presentation. Last month, the COC committee requested a presentation on the current funding in Maricopa County and what funding reductions we expect in 2024. Katie Gentry, Regional Homeless Program Manager, will now provide that presentation.
Sorry, friends. I was not as prepared as I should have been.
Oh, it's okay. In the meantime, I should say that if my co-chair were here and he saw this room so empty, he would have something to say about it. You all are getting off easy because it's just me here, but I just representing Richard's voice while Katie gets her whatever she's doing. You guys got off easy.
I can echo that.
Hello. Okay. So I'm going to give an overview of funding and talk about some of the challenges with funding to be completely transparent with you all. So jumping right in, this presentation is really in response to you all asking for more understanding of the funding. To be honest, a lot of this is going to solely cover government funding, but even government funding is very difficult to track. I could have a full-time staff person just tracking all the different government funding that goes in and it still wouldn't be enough. So want to just touch briefly on some of the government funding that can be used for homelessness. There's federal funds that come through jurisdictions such as block grant funding, things like Emergency Solutions Grant or ESG, Community Development Block Grant. There's federal funds that come through state agencies. So those would be things like the Access Substance Use Block Grant or the Mental Health Block Grant, things through DES or ADOH, like the Housing Trust Fund, federal funds. And then there's federal funds that go direct to agencies, things like the Continuum of Care grant, SAMHSA grants that go, that agencies apply directly through the federal government and go to those agencies directly for different means. There's also state funds through the legislator. So some of those state funds are allocated to state agencies that then turn around and RFP them out or NOFO them out. Others are to state agencies that state agencies spend in-house. And then there's local funds through council. So everything I just named at the state level also happens at every single council across the region. In just Maricopa County alone, we have 26 cities and towns that are all allocating funding through their individual councils. In addition to the in addition to Maricopa County. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the federal funding by year. As you can see, these are a number of different block grants that come and federal funds that come in directly to homelessness. I want to specifically highlight the dark blue and teal blue, those do not have to only be used for homelessness. For example, community development block grant, only 15% can be used for homelessness. For public services, other things can be used for like construction of a shelter, for example, but they cannot be used to provide rapid rehousing services or anything like that. Home is very similar. It can be used for tenant-based rental assistance. It can be used for construction of affordable housing, but it can't be used to operate a shelter on the flip side. So a lot of different nuance to these. Really, the biggest takeaway that I want you to take from this is our grants have not changed that much year to year at the federal level. So you can see kind of the biggest one that's expanded or contracted is our COC grant has continued to increase. We've not yet found out our 2023 grant, but you've just seen kind of an up and down of about $1 million across the different grants, and that a lot has to do with federal allocation. Now take into effect that COVID happened over the last 3 years, and we had a huge influx of money. So if you think about it, on the previous slide, you saw like ESG grants, for example, in Maricopa County are about $2.3 million per year. We had $39.7 million that came in under ESG CV that was able to be used directly for homelessness. And CDBG CV and Home ARP was really pushed to use specifically for homelessness, and regular rules didn't apply. So if you add up this slide, it's over $300 million between these different block grants that were used for homelessness, as well as COVID relief fund. And this also does not include SLRF funds, state and local fiscal recovery funds, which many cities did use to address homelessness here locally, over $300 million. So as well as state used some of that money. A lot of the $10 million grants that went out through the governor's office, for example. So I say this all to say that we are probably not going to see the sustained funding, because there's no way to sustain this funding when all of this funding was directly related to what we could do during COVID. Some takeaways. So COVID funding dramatically increased local budgets to be able to respond to homelessness. They do have a range of spend down funds. So some expirations happened in 2023, while other expirations don't happen through the end of 2026. So we've been working with jurisdictions to identify when those spend downs happen, what's the next game plan, especially for things that have been set up during COVID. A lot of our shelters, we've increased shelter 40% since COVID. And so how are we going to sustain all of those shelters without this increased amount of funding? And really trying to understand that we've put so much money into shelter, but we also need to have options at both ends of the spectrum. We need prevention, and we need to put money into that. Emergency rental assistance, for example, that I didn't even touch on this, which is a prevention fund, is going away. And on the back end, how are we going to get more people into housing, which we've been really limited in as we've put more funding into shelters. So I'm going to pause, see if you all have any questions or things you want to chat further about. My other big takeaway is this also does not include private funding and the support that nonprofits were getting significantly before COVID happened. So prior to COVID, that federal funding that was going kind of pretty stagnant, a lot of nonprofits were cushioning that with private funding that they were raising, and jurisdictions were able to offset some of that private raised funds through COVID, but that won't be able to be sustained kind of as we move into 2024, 2025 and beyond. So I'll turn it back to you, Co-Chair, see if you have any thoughts or questions.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation, Katie. I'll open it up to the committee for thoughts or questions.
Hi, this is Jim McPherson. Thanks, Katie. Great presentation. Appreciate it. And it's good to hear that agencies and organizations are talking with each other about the funds that are still out there and their deadline dates and how to make sure that what we still have is spent. And then you mentioned, in the future, what are we going to do as a community, as individual organizations to make up or the funding levels or funding that we'll need, but won't have through these current tools that came down through the federal government. So doesn't that need to be discussed by the powers that be?
So I think there is a lot of conversation at the jurisdiction level because so much of this is government funding. I will say we're not going to try to sustain $300+ million that were put into homelessness. A lot of, if you think about, especially early on in pandemic spending, it was a lot of let's get people into hotels very quickly to keep them safe in response to COVID. Now, some of that funding has been used to purchase hotels, and now, and some of the funding still allocated that's not yet spent is really looking at rehabilitation and being able to use those hotels permanently for either shelter or affordable housing. Flip side of that is there is going to be a shortage of funding. We will not be able to sustain the current level of shelter and housing support that is happening right now with the amount of funding that we previously were dedicating to homelessness. And so having a lot of conversations with both mayors, city managers, and staff about what does that look like? How do we continue those funds? How do we ensure that we now have all of these assets and can use them really effectively? So I think those conversations are happening. I think it's also hard because there's still a lot more money to be spent before 2026. And so, and a lot can change between now and then. So, and then the last thing I'll say too is the Housing Trust Fund will be a really good element to lean on. There's $150 million in it now, but really, how do we continue the level of funding kind of across all partners, with city, state, and federal all coming together to identify the best resource for the thing we are trying to spend on.
Thank you.
Katie, our two-part question. Do we have what are some ideas that are coming up in terms of sustaining some of the funds? And then also knowing, as you mentioned, that there's no way to sustain that level of funding. What are some of the ideas that are coming up as to how we'll, take down projects and move on without projects potentially?
I'm going to answer both, I think, simultaneously. So some projects have really been stood up as a temporary measure. So for example, a lot of the hotels that we've stood up are going away with the intention of we would open permanent shelters in response. So for example, there's hotels that are being set up, like small hotels, like 50% hotels that we are just renting that hotel with the intention of we're setting up a 225-person shelter. That's something that Phoenix is working on. They had a location identified that isn't going to work. So still working on an additional location, but the acquisition or the cost to set up that shelter is allocated currently in ARPA funds. So things that are a much higher dollar, hotels are one of our highest cost interventions. If we can start to move away from those into sustainable shelters, that will offset some of that. So I think a lot of what we're doing now is acquisition, rehab, construction, spending one-time dollars on that to be able to then be able to use that ongoing. I think the flip side of that is we have to find an ongoing operating cost. So I do think it is really leaning into communities to say, like, we need to put more funding into shelters. This is really important to be able to sustain the level of shelter that we have right now, but also being realistic and saying, what are other federal dollar sources that we can identify that could potentially be used? One of the things I was just in a conversation last week with our USICH TA person that said, like, currently we spend money on naloxone resources, for example, out of a homeless budget, but could that come out of a public health budget? And that opens up our homeless budget to be used differently. And so I think it's getting creative about that too, of what other funding sources could we be using that we're not tapping into as much as we should be.
Gotcha. Thank you. Jim, you have a question?
Well, actually, it's a follow-up to that. So I've noticed that the Arizona Community Foundation has been or is holding a series of webinars on different aspects of the issue, including funding. And so that got me thinking right now. Maybe that's an organization that we can reach out to and say, hey, it would be nice if either the Arizona Community Foundation or the coalition of funders, and I can't remember its new name. It was Arizona Grantmakers Forum. Maybe they can be brought into the discussion from at least the nonprofit sector of what they can do to help the cause in the future. And I'd be happy to set that up or work with, and I'm sure you know the folks over at Arizona Community Foundation, but just get something at least thinking about it.
Yes, thanks, Jim.
I'd take that just one small step further. Just probably horrible idea, but the thought of using convening power to bring together similar such funders as Arizona Community Foundation. Reason I say that is because I know that, say, just use ACF as an example. I don't know that this is true of them specifically, but just as a general example, it's possible that ACF funds 5 different agencies working in homelessness, and the funding that they provide to those agencies, while all doing really good things, don't really have any strategic tie-ins with each other. And that's just one agency that's funding this area. And so I imagine, whereas federal governments who pass money through all the various ways they pass money down have much more strategy. The people that they pass the money through are required to be strategic in their approach to use of funds, whereas the nonprofits do whatever, and the grant makers give them the money, and there's not that same strategic tie-in. So I wonder if it'd be possible to convene funders like ACF and others from the private sector to have strategic funding conversations that would be similar to conversations that we would have with federal government funders and others like that.
I'm sorry, and that's what that Grant Makers Forum organization is, but it's got a new name. So I'm trying to look for it, and that would be a variety of nonprofit funders. So I'll look for that.
We also, this was something that the board has brought up in their strategic plan, is how do we also bring businesses more to the table to, we have a lot of business foundations that are giving to a bunch of different partners, and how do we have them understand how all of those different partners work together and really leverage each other, and say like, this all does work together in tandem. So our system is super complex, and it's hard from the outside looking in saying, this is the agency that's truly working on this unique thing. For example, Homeless ID Project they are really good at IDs, right? And so how do we leverage kind of all of those different partners?
Yeah, I would think if they even saw stuff like what we just saw, one of the things that sticks out to me is how much it's needed to have funding come from somewhere else, because federal funding stayed mostly flat except for COC funding. And $300 million of COVID funding is going away. And so that really opens up a gap just from the visual. It would be great to have a conversation like that at some point.
Also, shameless plug, it could be good to have one of those people sitting on the committee. So if you have somebody who represents that community, definitely reach out to them.
Great idea. Any other discussion on this item, on funding presentation? All right, then let's move on to the strategic plan discussion. Annually, the Continuum of Care Committee is responsible for working on a variety of priorities as part of the COC's strategic plan. The COC committee will discuss what they would like to work on and hope to accomplish in 2024. We're going to start this conversation with a presentation from Jim McPherson on what he's put together that can kickstart what I hope to be a very robust and productive conversation around how we project plan all the many things that the committee is tasked with over the course of the year. So Jim, why don't you take us away?
Sure. Thank you. And greetings from chilly Ohio. So go right into the first slide. Great. So several meetings ago, Haley presented a variety of key events and activities that the Continuum of Care Committee and MAG staff work on, and I was going through the list there at the meeting, and then there after the meeting, I go, man, this would be a great start, or is a great start to a more formal strategic planning process. It's the meat of a strategic plan, the objectives and tasks. So I wanted to take a quick review of those tasks. Next slide, please. So and they broke it up into different timeframes. There were monthly tasks, including reviews of the system flow dashboard, where we would identify problem areas, areas needing attention. Next slide. Quarterly tasks, like reviewing the homelessness trends report and reviewing system performance measures, and it provides the months that activity would happen. The next slide, please. Then there's annual tasks that staff and the committee look at, and it's a pretty extensive list, very detailed. And here's a summary. Next slide. And then there were a couple of items that weren't like in the monthly, quarterly, yearly category, but still important to do. And these were the two that I had picked out from Haley's list. Increase connections to systems of care in the spring and develop education process for other systems of care, again in the spring. Okay, so next slide, please. So in any strategic planning process, and we all have gone through them in the past, and we have our different nomenclatures about the beginning, middle, and the end. And I'm just going to use this as an example, where you have an initiation and planning phase, you have an execution and monitoring phase, and then the closing phase. Next slide, please. So taking all those tasks that were outlined in Haley's memo and description of several months ago, those monthly tasks, quarterly, annual tasks, that is what's in the execution and monitoring phase of a strategic plan. If we pull together a more robust and detailed strategic plan, so 1/3 is pretty much done. So next slide, please. What's missing, though, I think, and I think we can really catch up and put this into a process, is just going through, thinking through and backing up a little bit about an initiation and planning phase, where we would define project scope, objectives, and deliverables, and many of those are already in those tasks. We would identify stakeholders for each of them and establish a communication plan if needed. And it's important also to assign a project manager and team members of each of those tasks, so we know exactly who to call. They may be repetitive, it may be the same person, but at least getting down on paper who those individuals are for each of those tasks. And then develop a project schedule for the year. And again, that's pretty much done through the list that Haley pulled together. So then a closing phase, and this is something that we can work on as we continue to move forward and have these discussions, is that that we review the objectives and the deliverables, the tasks, to ensure that they're completed at the end of, or near the end of a year. Collect feedback along the way from stakeholders on how those individual tasks are doing, how effective they are. Document lessons learned and best practices for future reference. And then, pull together a project annual report, or that closes out the year with all the materials that we've collected throughout the year of the tasks that have been achieved. So I think that may be so I was thinking that in addition of if we add an initiation and planning phase and a closing phase to the existing items that we already have, those monthly, quarterly, yearly tasks, that could be the guts, the bones of a strategic plan that will help us as a committee and MAG staff throughout the upcoming year. And it also helps to promote collaboration and effective decision-making along the way. So there you have it. That's thanks to Katie and Haley and co-chair Cruz and Smith for asking me to pull this together. It was just kind of a brainstorming thing that I did after Haley's list, and you're free to look at it, review it, think about it, mull it over as individuals and a collective to see what we can do next. Thank you, Chairman Cruz.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Any comments from the committee on that? Here's what I just kind of kickstart what hopefully would be a little bit more conversation on it. What I see there that needs to, first of all, the benefit of something like this is huge. When I still, I think wrapping up year one almost, this might be my 12th month on the committee or something like that. And when I came in and saw how many things were on the board strategic plan, well, first of all, thankfully that was sent to me, dug it out, had some conversations, eventually 4 months in, figured out what this all meant, kind of, and then was like, all right, how are we going to actually do this? Then what ends up happening, I've said this before, but what ends up happening is, you're going through your first year, you don't even know what some of these things are, but you're just trying to pretend because everybody else around you is so smart. And then you get a document and it's on consent agenda for approval and you have no idea what you're looking at. And so the idea would be, how do we prepare ourselves so that before the Continuum of Care board, which by the way, is passing through dozens of millions of dollars of funding that in many ways is governed by the documents that we approve. And I don't think it's responsible for us to approve these things blindly without at least some representation of our committee having a very good understanding of what it is, why it's being approved, or being able to recommend meaningful suggestions. Of course, the weight of that doesn't have to sit on this committee alone. The beautiful thing about MAG's convening power is when they send something out, even when they get bad attendance, they get 3 people who will show up and say something that represents the community of providers, and they give great input. So we have to think about, what kind of things need to be done to prepare us to do that closing phase well, where the things that we approve and send up to the board can trust that they have been well vetted and developed. And that takes basically, I'll reframe language just a bit. I'll take what Jim's calling tasks and call them objectives. And what we would really need to do then is task those objectives out. Jim put something in there that was really great, that for each of those, you need to have someone identified as a program manager and or project manager, and someone identified, or team members who are identified. Well, we always ask, and oftentimes we volunteer to do those things when they come up. Wouldn't it be great if we did that a bit ahead of time so that each of us had a better sense throughout our very busy days and schedules of the kinds of things that we would be responsible for and expected of us a week from now, a month from now. And I think we could stretch the burden out well if we took some time and if we spent some real time on what Jim's calling the initiation and planning phase for all of those things. I think we have better deliverables, and it would be less stressful for us because we're doing these things anyway. So I wanted to add that. Jim, thank you so much for that presentation. And from there, I'll open it up to the committee for comment and conversation.
And Co-Chair, I just want to add, that is like a great format for all of our annual tasks, like Jim was saying. But you can also use this time to sort of think about our strategic plan for 2024 that all the committees give input in. Next month, we will be giving our final list of things that we would want to work on as a committee to the board for their approval / assignment. So I know that there was excitement, but maybe a little mixed feelings around our systems of care. So if there's something that is also really jumping out to you, or if you sit on this committee and maybe in the past have been like, oh, the stuff that we work on doesn't really feel relevant to me, this is a great time to offer up something that does feel relevant and will make an impact. So I think that the board definitely is on the edge of no bad ideas, send us everything, and then we'll tell you what is reasonable to work on. So definitely use this as a time to just throw anything and everything out there. And then we'll let the board do the hard work and sort through it all. So sorry, Katie.
So this is Jim again. We've been talking about work groups. So if you are considering putting together a work group on strategic planning, and if not, just informally, I'd be happy to participate in that and help out in any way I can.
We are trying to use time during our meeting to do that. So if you have any ideas now, that would be wonderful. But we are going to have an office hours.
After your next meeting, shout out, you all should come in person because office hours is also in person from 11 to 12:30 or 11:30 to 1 on November 8th.
And Katie, just to clarify, that will only be in person, correct?
It will be hybrid, so you can show up virtually too.
Well, I will be back in town.
I wish it was chilly here. It's teasing us. Just to clarify, Haley, we want to use this time for discussion around future priorities, not necessarily around project planning. Or were you saying both, just to clarify?
We can talk about both. We can also, since our priorities that Jim was mentioning are things that we revisit on a regular basis, we can always take some time in another meeting to do that too, if we don't feel like we had talked about that in a robust enough way. But yeah, definitely, since we are a little more time bound to the strategic plan, want to get your thoughts on that first, and then definitely I think we could work out some time in the future to talk about our plan of attack for our other priorities.
Gotcha.
I will also say these ideas don't have to be fully refined. Say you wanted to spend time diving into prevention as like a general concept. That can be the concept that you all are putting forward, and it can be refined over time and refined by the board as they're putting it into the strategic plan. Think of it as like general concept ideas and less like task orientation of we need to identify 3 new prevention providers in our community.
And that's a real good point, because you can slice and dice tasks, objectives in different ways. And this one, the way I had sliced and diced it, it was by time frame. But you're right, maybe each of those tasks can be fit under a category. Once you have all the categories, then you go, oh, well, there's plenty. Oh, there's a hole. And then look to think about how can the hole be filled.
And some of that is available in what obviously was just presented now, which comes off the board strategic plan. I would say I'm going to steal Katie's idea, and as a committee member, it will officially go down as mine, that prevention is a great idea for us to consider as a priority for us next year. Please let everyone know how smart I am, my great ideas. But actually, and again, just whether or not we decide to do it, at least for right now, we can throw ideas out. I think for me, the reason why Katie, I think that's a great idea is because that's one of those things that the community is always on about, is what's going on in prevention. How come prevention and intervention systems are so disconnected? I hear that quite a bit. So as the COC committee, I think it's good for us to at least have that in front of us as a potential to go to the board with, if we feel like we have the bandwidth for it. Otherwise, I think the traction we've gained and the stuff that was already assigned to us has been good. And I'd like to see that through. So I'm not adding other things on because of that alone. I'd like to be good at what we're already working on. But the prevention one was a good idea, Katie. Yeah, thank you. Anything else like that?
Richard?
Oh, yeah.
Hi, this is Dawn over at HYC. One of the things I'd like the committee and our community to consider is that prevention also needs to include what we're currently doing with youth identified as homeless, because we're in the process of doing a study with ASU and Helios that talks about, or I should say, is actually confirming the anecdotal data that we have on the youth that participate in our program. They graduate, they end up going into post-education, post-secondary education, or into the career force. They're not going into adult homelessness or chronic homelessness. At some point in time, we need to start looking upstream instead of always trying to fish everybody out the river. Who's throwing everybody in the river? And so one of the things that we're trying to do with this study is put hard data in place so people can see how important that prevention is. Just my 2 cents. And I should say thank you.
You're quite welcome, Dawn. And thank you for the comment. Here's the reason why I will just go there with you is, and if this is how I'm taking it in, definitely correct me if I'm hearing you wrong. One of the things though that rattles around in my mind as a result of what you're saying is that we could stand to do some research on what is working and what could work. So you just gave a really great example. In one of the work group meetings, I can't remember which one, Haley was running it, and I was there, and Margaret said something about, we talk a lot about evidence-based practices, and we should talk more about practice-based evidence to then figure out what should work. And so I'll take that way. Is there's, you know, I know ASU's represented here. There are other colleges and universities that are looking for research projects of this nature. And I would love to try some things potentially, maybe see if there's a way that the community could invest in things like, Don, what you're describing, to see if they can scale and if they work at scale, and collect the evidence on that, and maybe add new ways, creative ways of doing things to our community that maybe don't exist or aren't emphasized right now. So I'll summarize that as looking into research projects on practices that work. Dawn, is that how you would, is that consistent with what you're saying, or would you offer a priority different than what I just said?
No, that's close to what I'm saying. But I guess the other thing I'm saying is that we need to put some money into prevention. There, in addition to what we're trying to do with ASU and Helios, and I'll let the discussion keep going. I'm going to find an article that I just saw yesterday. $2 million was set aside by HUD. I'm sure many of you familiar with this, to do research about strategies and things. And NAU was allocated the majority of that funding. I've reached out to the city partners that we have in Flagstaff to see who those representatives are, because one of the things that they're looking at is, you know, street encampments and a couple other things. Like I said, I can find the article really quick and let you know what the target is going to be, but we're reaching out to see if we can be included in that so they can have some hard data.
Thank you. Anyone else have comments? All right, wonderful. We'll go to the next agenda item, which is on decreasing returns to, or systems care work group. So decreasing returns to homelessness was identified as part of the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care's system performance measures. In order to accomplish this goal, Matt Finley, Human Services intern with MAG, and I will discuss the current work being done in these work groups and how to better focus efforts to increase connections to other systems of care.
I'm much less cool, but I will be representing Matt today. He is out sick.
Don't cut yourself short.
So they had the first meeting of the CORES work group, the Continuum Referral to External Systems. And so that was on September 18th. It was the first meeting, so they reviewed and approved the mission and goals, which include developing one-pagers and frequently asked questions that can be provided to case managers across systems. So that'll be both case managers within the homelessness system and then information to the case managers outside of the homelessness system in education, healthcare, etc. The group is also working on a systems map that will help create a better understanding of the current services and entry points for the systems represented in that group. The next group meeting is on October 16th, so next week. If anybody would like to join, please let me know and we'll get that invite sent over to you. We are hoping to have this whole work group wrapped in the next few months so we can get this information out to people as quickly as possible. So happy to take any questions on that work group. Otherwise, I will turn it over to Nate for our other work group.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the other work group if you all recall, just recap real fast, connecting our systems of care work group really split into two. One that's looking on systems external to the homeless system, which is what Haley was just describing, and then the other, which is looking to gaps within that are internal to the homelessness system, and focusing specifically on on returns to homelessness within rapid rehousing. And so we have gotten rapid rehousing funders and providers together in encouraging conversations around what are some of the things that would be recommended from the provider side to funders around ways that we can do rapid rehousing better in order to reduce some of those gaps. Very encouragingly, funders were listening to providers in that conversation and giving great feedback. And so we reconvened and had conversations around what to do next with that feedback, and essentially have decided to really focus on, we've broken it down into a couple of different types of priorities that the work group's focusing on. Some of them are contract focused, and then others are client focused. And on the contract focused things that we're looking at, it's really adding flexible funding to the contract and maybe adjusting contract lengths to match best practices around rapid rehousing subsidy lengths. And essentially what the funders have asked for is for us to give them some more specifics that they can take action on potentially. And so as an example, one of the things that they're asking for is, if we're talking about flexible funding, how much flexible funding is needed. It's so to step back, it's really encouraging that the response from funders to providers is not no, or that's a terrible idea, or come on, that we're limited. It is, hey, the limitations, but let's get more information. And some of the information that they're asking for is, what percentage potentially of an overall contract should be devoted to flexible funding. Some of the things that have come out of this conversation are, hey, some of the stuff you guys are describing that would be useful to have flexible fund pools for exists within the rapid rehousing expenditures, right? You're allowed to spend money. There are allowed costs on some of these things that some providers maybe didn't know about. So out of this, there's going to come some hopefully better education, broader education to providers around what allowable expenses in rapid rehousing are. But also the work group has to deliver back to them some more clear recommendations as to how much should be set aside for flexible funding and what those funds could be used for. So we're looking at things, like I said, that are client focused and contract focused. On the client focused side, they're going to be looking at how to increase employment and income, and how to improve natural supports to come alongside people to help them increase their community and stability in housing. And the next meeting is November 1st. And so really encouraged to have been making progress. That committee talked about, that work group talked about, should we or should we not disband now that we've gotten to this point? And the sentiment was, no, we want to see something concrete happen. So let's follow it through till we get there. And so that's what we're doing.
Yes. And then just to add on to that, with us moving in a new direction, or a continued direction rather, it's a great time to hop onto the work group. So if you haven't been participating before, even if you don't do rapid rehousing, your input is super valuable, and we would really appreciate having your perspective. So definitely feel free to join us on November 1st.
Are there any comments or questions or discussion from the committee?
I just have a comment. Has that committee specifically discussed the referral process to other service providers or resources? And have you all talked to Contexture about the Community Cares Unite Us platform?
That is the Continuum referral to external systems work group. We have not talked to Contexture. We've just had our first meeting, like I said, but definitely open to talking to anybody who wants to help us. But yeah, we have, that is the goal of that work group, is to create one pagers. So we know how to refer into other, the system knows how to refer into healthcare systems, education systems, etc. And then also giving them the tools to refer into our homelessness system if they aren't already able to do that.
And the only reason I mention this is because the platform is free. And there are also incentives to be part of this platform. And HSC has just signed on with several of its campus partners to engage in a closed loop referral system. So I'm just putting out there that all these rapid rehousing providers or any homeless service provider can access the system and refer to all resources inside of our own system and outside of our system. And we would be able to see the outcomes of those referrals and speak back directly to those providers through the referral system. So just putting that out there as a resource.
Thank you so much.
Well, just to follow up on that, Tish, one of the things about contexture, first of all, most of us who, if you don't work in like behavioral health world, you may not be completely familiar with contexture. It's a platform used by a lot by access providers, and we just became an access provider, so I just found out about all of what it's about and everything. And it's one of those things that needs sort of a critical mass for it to be useful. So if more, in other words, providers from the homelessness world actually use the system, it actually would become really useful for closed.
It would.
If we don't, then we don't have that as an option. And then it's just a few people referring people back and forth to each other, and then the system's not real represented in there. So it's one of those things that it would be great if, because behavioral health providers do use this successfully, homeless services providers could use it successfully like also. And they are onboarding. They are taking in new people and will be doing big onboardings in 2025. So it's a great time to get ready to use that.
Yeah, and it's free and it's incentivized.
Any other discussion? All right, thank you. So do committee members have any action or discussion items for future meetings?
Hello, Vanessa with ABC. I'd love to give the committee an update on our move on strategy.
Committee would love to hear it. I believe. I can't just say that unilaterally. I would love to hear it. Anything else?
All right, since we're only talking about the move on strategy, I'm going to be so excited to hear everybody's ideas for the strategic plan next month. And then we're going to roll it right into the office hours. So everybody come prepared.
Yep.
Vanessa with ABC. I just want to do one more plug for coming in person then next week so we can really dive into strategic planning as it will set the path forward for us. And I love how, Jim, how you talked about project planning. I think that that's crucial to being successful and reaching our goals. I just want to give Nikki Ramirez some props with the Race Equity Committee. She has a form that like a project planning document that she utilizes to keep us on track, and it's been very helpful. So maybe we can create something like that around the priorities that we decide on, and hopefully if we have a lot of time next meeting, we can accomplish that. But it's always better, it's always easier when you have people in the room and get those ideas out there together.
Agreed.
I'll commit to bringing pastries. That encourages anybody to come.
Helps me.
Chairman Cruz, Vanessa, can you send a copy of that form to
I'll ask Nikki Ramirez to forward it.
we can build and
If she's upset, which
It'd be great for all the committees to see that.
Yeah.
If it's a useful tool.
totally.
Vanessa, you can also send it to me if you want me to send it out on your behalf. I'm happy to do that too.
It's not mine, it's Nikki Ramirez. So I'm probably stepping out of line with offering her intelligence. So let me touch base with her. I just wanted to give her props, and I'm sure we can do something similar, either way.
We're also happy to reach out to you, Vanessa, if that puts you in a better position.
It's fine.
Haley, I had one real quick. This thing is super loud. Brian with MAG. So some of the work that the coordinated entry committees work group on the new assessment tool. Hopefully we'll be ready for review sometime soon. Anticipating on the next agenda, it could be ready. We still have to meet with the CE committee to move that forward, but everything goes well, we should be ready.
Good, good. Okay, so I will just say that I think we should, and I will, so because I have a chance to actually do this. So if you disagree now, please say it now. But when I get a chance, when we sit down and we prep the agenda for the next meeting, I'm going to say, let's keep as our big agenda item. In other words, our 30-minute agenda item. We usually only have one of those as the strategic plan. Go back and think about, we've had this conversation. So of course, we may not have a lot of discussion around it here and now as it's just hitting you, but please think about what it looks like to add potential priorities that a few of us could be working on to represent the committee over the next year. And let's be ready for probably, I would say, Richard and I to go present to the board at that time that happens. And also setting aside that time to start to really task out the objectives and see who's going to be doing what. So I would just say that unless there's any objection, I will offer that to be our biggest agenda item for next month. And if there are no other discussion on that item, we will go to comments from the committee. For this next agenda item, comments from the committee. Is there anyone on the committee that has any other announcements or events that they would like to highlight? Does anyone on MAG staff have any other announcements?
I have a couple announcements. I'm going to start with the downer announcement and then lead into the exciting announcement. So we did get word from HUD about our youth homelessness demonstration project grant. We were not awarded. So that is unfortunate, but we're still moving forward. We have talked to our youth action committee. Their intention is to apply next year. So hopefully we will get our feedback soon on how we can make our application better. And then we will be working towards that for next summer. On a more positive note, we've been hearing a lot that folks are having challenges with increasing income and employment. So we have rolled out a new training in the learning management system that focuses on increasing income for clients. So that has information on benefits, benefit cliffs, because we've heard that is a big problem. People are concerned about losing benefits if they have too much income. And then just some how-to guides for common issues that we've heard that employees run into with their employers, like how to talk about, I have a dependent who is sick and I can't come into work, or I take public transit and it's challenging for me to get to work early in the morning. So there are some guides in there. So that is live on the site. If you guys would like to take that training and check it out and give any feedback would be wonderful too. So yeah, and then we also have another toolkit that's more designed for employers, probably less relevant to this group, but if you have any employers who are interested in working with folks who are maybe re-entering the workforce for the first time in a little while, we have a guide for them too, and that's also on our website, and I will include that in my follow-up email to you all. But yeah, that is it from me.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, please.
Here's also your plug. If you're not in the learning management system, fill out the COC partner survey and get onboarded. One other note, the COC officially launched their social media. So if you have Twitter and want to follow Maricopa COC, you should follow us. And the announcement that Dawn shared about NAU's research is on our social media, already retweeted. So you can find the article right after you hit follow.
Thank you, Katie. And congrats on the retweet. Dawn, your hand's up.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Katie, so much. I did find the article, and I just wanted to let everybody know that what NAU is doing is a 3-year project to document encampment resolution strategies, their effectiveness, and their impact on people experiencing homelessness in Arizona's 3 largest counties, Maricopa, Pima, and Yuma. So I also sent an email to Haley and Katie to forward the article to you. So if you see it via email or tweet, I think it's a pretty good indication of what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from anyone else?
I've got a quick another MAG announcement. Through the Pathways Home Initiative, we've done a look at the Arizona data landscape through a contractor, ICF, and they will be here on Monday from 12 to 2 p.m. At the MAG offices on the second floor, presenting that the results of their analysis of all things data in the state of Arizona. So if you are interested in that, definitely encourage you to join either in person or via Zoom. And I will make sure that Haley sends out the Zoom registration link with her email to you all.
Is that all things homeless data or all things like, wait, what's the scope of the data? Yeah.
Yeah.
Homelessness. Okay.
Yeah. Homeless data.
Gotcha.
I would say it's like HMIS and then other partnered projects. So like the data warehouse project and what ASHAC is doing with their analysis, which the NAU project is part of ASHAC, etc.
Gotcha.
There's also a blurb about it in the newsletter. If you haven't read it, definitely take a look at that or subscribe if you're not subscribed yet. All right. Well, with no further business, the meeting is now adjourned. You get 10 plus minutes back. Thank you for your time. See you in person next time.